We have a $5 Woodcraft gift card and four $10 craft supply gift cards and an assortment of wood. So, Dave, do you want to stand up so people can see you selling tickets? We'll do the raffle at the end of the meeting. We will have show and tell tonight as soon as I finish the announcements. I have just a couple of informational things to share, and I'll put this in the newsletter. It'll come out in approximately a week or so. The AAW Symposium is coming up in Raleigh, June 4th through the 7th. There is a chapter discount that you can use when you register to get a discount. I believe you have to sign up for all 3 days for this to apply. But the discount code, write it down, MAWT 2026. It's super secret. You can contact me if you forget it. Also coming up, Turn on Chicago. Registration is now open. So Turn on Chicago is July 30th to August 2nd. Always a great event. A number of people here have been to it. So if you have any questions, ask around and talk to someone who's been there. It's a great event. I was also contacted by the Worldwide Woodturners organization. They have an event coming up in Wisconsin Rapids on September 17th through the 19th. They're calling it Level Up. It's 3 days of demonstrations. Did you have something, Greg?
Those lights kind of dark on the screen. The ones that are above you right there.
Can we take that off?
We'll turn on here. Oh, right here. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. I don't know. There's one line. Sorry, but I forgot to introduce the new members. Dave Dorgan. Dave, over there. Mike Seabrook. Mike Seabrook. New member. And another Mike. I don't know how we're gonna keep them apart. Mike Meyer. New member. And I guess Richard Henderson. Mike. And there was wasn't there another guest that signed in or didn't sign in? Did I get everybody? Okay. Okay. So guess. Okay. Thank you. All right. Sorry about that.
Okay, so just to finish up on the worldwidewoodturners.org, they also host a free Zoom meeting on Wednesday evenings. It's a worldwide group of woodturners. Some of you are familiar with it. So see Jay if you want to know. Jay, raise your hand so people can see you. So it's a group of worldwide woodturners, and they have demonstrations, and is it every Wednesday of the month? Oh boy. Okay. Well, yeah. So there's that. And then if you go to that worldwidewoodturners.org site and you're interested in going to that event in Wisconsin Rapids, you can sign up for it there. There is a fee for it. Jim Kinnair, did you want to say something about Washington Park Senior Center?
Last November, coached by Representative Washington Park Senior Center. They have a wood shop there, and the woman inquired as to whether we would be able or interested. So, Fred Ruth, someone, and I went over there earlier this week, and we picked a date and time this coming February 25th at 10:30 in the morning. We're gonna put on a small demonstration. Fred's got some wood he wants to make some splinters out of, and show them kind of what we're all about. The only thing is we're going to be taking one of our Raycon lathes with us, and I could really use some help carrying it up the stairs. So if I could get a couple of volunteers for and like 9 o'clock in the morning when the craft opens on Wednesday, February 25th. And then maybe we can pick a time to drop it off later. It'd be appreciated. Otherwise, we'll get on the series.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim. So then the next mentored open shop day is February 21st, right? And Tony is out of town, so you would connect up with Ron Zadroik right here. If you're interested, it's 9:30 to noon. So that is coming up. Daryl, you wanted to say something about the youth group.
Yes. Youth group, standing up to that project and taking it forward since progress. However, there are some things we need to do first. Some of which include purchasing tooling for the youth. But before we do that, we need to inventory all of the stuff that we have. So we know what we have, what we need to buy. And I'm kind of new to wood turning, so I don't know what half of that stuff is. So I'm gonna need some help identifying what this stuff is. So if there's anybody that is willing to help me inventory this, I'll be glad to take all the notes. You can tell me what is in all these cabinets over here. If you're interested in willing to help, I would probably do it on like a Sunday afternoon or something like that. Just stop by at the break and let me know. I'll take your contact information down. Also, if you are interested in being a mentor to help with you, do the turning, once we start that part of the process up, please let me know. I'll take your contact information and I'll be informed of developments in terms of training or organization. Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. So next month's meeting, March, will be Cindy Drozda. She'll be doing an interactive remote demo from her studio in, I believe it's Boulder, somewhere in Colorado. Is it Boulder? Okay. So I think she's doing finials, but I'm not absolutely sure because Tony arranged the meeting with her. So that'll be great. So because it's Cindy, we want to give her as much time as possible. There will be no show and tell or no wood raffle next month. We'll resume that back in April.
Will she be on Zoom also?
It will only be on Zoom.
Okay, so we did it at home.
Oh, I'm sorry. It will be on Zoom, but it'll be here or at home. Yes. I misunderstood the question. So I know we did that one meeting with Lyle Jameson where there was nobody here. He wanted everybody at home, but Cindy didn't specify that. So for those of you who want to come here and watch it, you can do so. But no, like I said, no raffle, no show and tell. Okay, let's so tonight's speaker, I'll introduce him after show and tell. Let's do show and tell. So it would be good if we could kind of orderly do this. So it looks like what kaleidoscopes or whatever on the end. We'll just go from that end to whatever's on the left end of that table there. Ray.
Kaleidoscope.
Oh, okay. A couple of years ago, I came across a fellow online, Jim Duxbury. You might be familiar with him. He has articles in the AAW magazine and Wood Turning magazine quite regular. He's 93 years old, and he had plans for a kaleidoscope. And so, everybody, it's the most impractical thing that there is. So all you do, you look down the tube and see the pretty colors, but everybody likes them, and so I gave a couple away as gifts and I picked it back up. I had made several tubes. And so I picked the project back up this last month. I got kind of tired of turning round and round and, I had to do something different. So, they're a fun project. Kids love them. If you're looking to make something for a gift for someone, or maybe something for somebody to set on their desk, it does involve some glass cutting and there's some intricate things on the inside, but most of the turning is pretty easy. This one, Jim Andresen got me started on doing the segments. And then I had a bunch of segments, didn't know what to do with them. I was playing around. So I made one out of segments, but I wasn't able to turn them offset because it changes the the tunnel on the inside has to fit the mirrors. And so we're going to try and retool that and redo it. But I have his information if anybody is interested in getting the plans for the kaleidoscopes.
Why do I have to follow that? I just wanted to point out that I did a live edge ash bowl, and it was you need two live edge bowls, one oak, one ash, for my daughter for her birthday, and she got to choose which one. So she chose the ash or the elm or the oak. But this is one of the bowls that came from the wood that came from the ash that we took down in Hales Corners. And I want to point out the injection holes stains that were on the wood. Can't really change that now. But more interestingly, the bark have these wonderful little dots that make it really very interesting, plus a little bit of figuring on the side. This was right near the root flare of the tree, which makes me think that that might be some wood that would be something you don't get rid of when you're a turner, because there might be more figuring in that flare at the base. So that's all I have. Thank
for
you.
the first time in 27 years to deliver an emotional tribute to Roberta Flack and her Nothing Even Matters collaborator,
Life has been after me to clean up my shop, and so I had this piece of wood, and it looked like this,
United before
but
right
like this. And as I was turning it, because of what the worms or the bugs did to these pieces,
Prince of
I
Darkness.
found that it was starting to collapse on me. So I had to be very, very careful. I ended up making two pieces out of it. But it showed me that you can get art
We've
out of it.
experienced the biggest loss we will ever go through.
And so I just thought this, she says, you aren't selling this one. She likes this one. I like this one. So,
Memorial, which had personal meaning this year after
and then the bases,
How is that family doing? How are those kids doing right now? Everybody's hanging in there. We miss Brandon so much. We all have a big text chain that we stay together and talk about it. Your family wants your family for life. You bet. Whether you like them or not, they gotta stay there.
but I need a UV light to do that, right? Oh, this was cut years ago. Okay. Okay. So I'll have to get a UV light and check it out. So there you go.
I have a fairly simple bowl here. Again, a very simple segmented piece, little patina on the front, the patina paint. This is different various shades of maple. Looks pretty cool, actually. So I'm real happy with it. But since I'm up here and Kevin has allowed me to do this, I got a couple of quick announcements. Regarding the February workshop, if anyone, you can talk to me during, this evening during the break. But Kevin's also going to post my email address. So if you want to get back to me on that, I'll need maybe a couple more mentors. And then if you want to drop over and learn something, let me know. Beads of Courage. I dropped off about a week or so ago. I dropped off 10 bowls to the hospital, Children's Hospital, Wisconsin. And they only want a certain amount of bowls per year, and the rest of the bowls are going to be, we're going to start shipping them directly to the Beads of Courage office, which is located in Arizona. So continue making them. We'll just be shipping them out to them, and then they distribute them to the hospital across the country who needs them. And finally, if anyone has been involved in any of the events that the club has been doing, the empty bowls, German Fest or the Holiday Folk Fair, we need, and also you're talking about moving lathes, we need an efficient way to move these lathes. You know, as we all get older, it's not fun lifting them up those stairs. A comment has been made about using one of the electrically powered hand trucks. That's a possibility. There's other types of hand trucks. The point is that if anyone has interesting ideas on how to easily move lathes and other equipment that we use, we have the screens, the protection screens, and things like that. Let me know. Again, my email will be posted when Kevin sends out the newsletter. Let me know how that's done. The the board has allowed some funds to be moved in that direction, and it would just make life easier for us to do events and any more events in the future. That's it. Thanks.
While Lee's walking up, this was left on the table at last month's meeting. If this belongs to you, you can pick it up. I'll set it over there. I'm not sure what it is. It's fairly light, but maybe cedar. Mike will tell you. Here. It's yours. All right.
So those of you who were here last month for my demo, this is the finished product. This is the bowl that I was in the process of turning. Somebody posited that it was not cherry, but probably buckthorn, and I think they're right. So I have a big pile of buckthorn, which is a little disappointing, but it's okay because it's still pretty wood. But the rest of the turning went okay. And then as I was removing the tenon, it burst into 3 pieces and went 3 different corners of the shop. So it took me about 15 minutes to find the 3rd piece. And it was clear that I couldn't continue without some reinforcement. So I put a base on it that kind of encapsulates the tenon and, you know, finished it that way. But it turned out okay. I did a little flaming to sort of emphasize some of the cracks rather than try to disguise them. I just thought, you know, they're here. Let's tell the story. So this is the final result. I like it. It's a pretty little bowl. And then I had been wanting for a long time to try turning a log that basically had all of the heartwood rotted out. And when you're looking for a log like that, it's hard to find one, especially one that you don't have to carry 5 miles through the woods. So I finally found one up in Rhinelander. Okay. And yeah, so it was actually an easy turn. I thought it was going to be more difficult than it was, but it was actually a pretty easy turn. By far, the sanding and finishing was more difficult than the turning. My goal was to not really do anything to the interior except just smooth it out, just kind of let it have its original contours. So I did that with a wire brush and some flap sanders and everything. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this too as a first effort. Going back to Rhinelander later this month, I'm going to try to find some more of those logs. But I think this is ash, maybe. Actually, I didn't, surprisingly. I did start to get some chatter, of course, as I turned it thinner because, you know, I was getting some movement here, which is why I didn't go any farther than I did. It's probably still about 1 inch thick here, but yeah, it really was a pretty smooth experience. I was pretty surprised, but yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed doing it. So.
Like I'm back in grade school. I haven't done storytelling in a long time. Anyway, one of the things I really enjoy making over the years has been flower vases. To make them water or dry for the fun. This was a piece of ambrosia maple. Right work for that? Yeah, we got this from good buddy of mine who found me for the care of. Well, you're talking about these shapes have been around in the dirt. And this is probably one of them. Then the red walnut. Then my favorite tree of all time is a crab apple. It wasn't my front yard. I had to go away some landscape. It just really, the finish is so clean. The hardest part of a lot of this is drilling, and anybody got builder's right. Drilling and drilling large holes. Not found perfect tool. It's the best thing I've done lately is drill. You got to start with the portion of it, then come through with a fine, and then hopefully it's not well. But I thought 12,000 shot and 3,000. Bring your legs right down when you or from the portion, right? Yeah, all the way down. Actually, I bought a new lathe. Tried doing this, and that new lathe is not much of a actually threw off the. Oh, I have to. So it was on warranty. Well, you didn't like this book.
No, if I've done anything like this, I have a new set of form for me. 4 inch to 2.5 inches. I'll go. It takes some. Just slowly creep. That way you keep it very.
I agree with it, but I haven't started to finish, because you'll never center up long.
Oh, yeah.
Right, I mean, I gotta go a half inch or so with things.
Right, half inch further.
And then I can play with fine. Thanks, guys.
In my first challenge at turning a goblet. They're more difficult than I assumed, and I still have problems hollowing out on the inside. So down towards the very bottom, it's not quite as smooth as I'd like, and I kept getting little tiny catches. And I didn't want to do like I suggested the last time, is sanding the outside down till I got to the thinness I wanted. But it did turn out pretty nice, and it was a very pretty piece of wood that I found. And so that was my first goblet that I've attempted. So I may be tempted to try it again.
What finish?
This is just Doctor's high the polish. That's the high speed. That's why I used the grit, the I can't think the name of it, but it's the paste with a little grit in it. Yeah, that one. I used that to start with. Once I got it smooth, as much I went down just to 320 on sandpaper. Then I used that to get the finish. But then I used the high-speed polish to get a surface on it. And it seemed to turn out pretty nice. It's not too shiny. It doesn't look like shellac or anything. And yet it does have a nice luster to it. But the wood was very easy to work with. It was actually very soft. It's cocobolo, and I thought it would be much harder than it was. But it sounded very, and it was just some beautiful grain in it. And I really loved that one. So that one will not go anywhere. Yes, well, it turned well. I didn't have anything to do with that. The the wood did that magic part, but it did turn out to be there's just a beautiful pattern in it, and it fits with the vertical part of it also. And then talking about green, this is a piece of cherry I had left over from a long time ago, and I had made a blank out of it. It had been sitting around, and when I got ready to turn something with it, I found that I saw a little tiny hairline crack starting on the outside. So I said, well, then I will make that the bottom. I was going to do something else with it. And so I started turning it, figure I might be able to turn it out. And it just kept going and going and going. And as it turned out, it actually went all the way through. It still came on the inside. And after I got done and finished it, I do notice that the crack tends to run all the way across the whole side. But when I started turning, when I saw that and it wasn't disappearing, I was thinking of just throwing it away. And as I was doing that, this beautiful green pattern started showing up, and it was on the inside also. So I couldn't dispose of it. I just kept turning it and things. And I did put some CA glue in this and took some of the powder and put in there. So it does still show up as a crack, but it's not open and things like that. So again, I just love the patterns, that shows up. And I thought it'd be good because you can see where the branch or little branch tried to grow through it one time, but I don't know what caused all the other unusual patterns here at some time. I don't know if a branch was nearby or was trying to make a burl or what. You might have a better idea. Yeah. What made it do all this strange stuff? See from here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
This was a piece of mystery wood. I got it at the auction 2 months, 3 months ago, I guess now. Not sure what it is, but it's coming out really nice. And there's a whole bunch more that came with it. And this is just a random piece of black walnut I found in the basement when I was looking for something to glue. It came out really nice. This is my new favorite shape, by the way. I've done like 5 of these. And it came out nice. Finishes just a coat of shellac, chased with 2 applications of Yorkshire grit, and it's exactly the way I like my shine to come out, not too plasticky looking or anything. So, and then there's this one. This comes down as one of the ugliest pieces of wood I ever started with. It started as a scar that healed over. I got like a dozen of these from a friend that just dropped them in the driveway. I couldn't figure out how to get it onto the lathe. I ended up gluing a piece of elm to the bottom that I had in the shop. What I ended up doing was, thanks to Jim Anderson, I built my own take on his donut chuck. And this jam portion is threaded in, so you can change it for different profiles, depending on what you want to put on. And the booger on the inside went on the jam, and the rest of it stuck out here through one of the different rings I've got for it. And I was able to put a mortise in there and then get it on the lathe. And from there, it was almost easy sailing. When I got to do the inside, I had it wrapped in duct tape and zip ties because pieces started flying all over the place. Luckily, they were small pieces and no band-aids, lawyers or fire trucks were involved. And then the other thing I have for you guys, I've been passing these out the past few months. They're angle gauges for those of you that use traditional tools. If you want one, they're on the table. There's about 15. They have everything from 10 to 80-degree angles there. You can check your tool angle on. So that's it.
Thanks, everyone. Lots of interesting things. Oh, one more.
You're cutting into tonight's presenter's time, though. Well, yes. Well, this is separate, though, because this was a natural edge bowl. It's actually 2 natural edge bowls. And I turned this almost 20 years ago around. So, no, actually, it's magic. Well, I mean, they're both obvious how to turn them. Right. It was a total accident.
Oh, okay. So you didn't plan for the.
I didn't plan for it. It'd be pretty hard to, get into it, but it'd be very good. And I think I turned these in the same plan now. When we talked about this.
Okay, one more.
All right.
You guys keep sneaking up on it. Oh my gosh.
Well, I got this cool apple trunk that he had given me a couple of blanks. This is another willow chunk, just experimenting with some different shapes. So those 2 turned out pretty good. And then a guy in Random Lake gave me a bunch of cottonwood. So I just got around to turning this one. It's 20 inches in diameter. It was fun to turn. So I don't know.
Thanks, everyone. This evening's demonstrator is Dennis Motl. Dennis is going to be sharing a presentation on dust collection and sanding. So, Dennis, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. I started out as a member of the Saturday group, and I'm not exactly sure when that was, but probably in late 1900, early, 1990s, late 19. Yeah. Yeah, a long time ago. Oh, so long ago that I can't remember anymore. Uh, yeah, so I've been fighting dust for a long time, and we've been in our current house for 35 years, and my system has just sort of evolved, organically. We don't get much dust up on the house anymore, although we get chips, from clothes and, shoes and whatnot. And I've got a metal lathe, and occasionally I get chips in my hair and those get brought up and they end up in bed and we're still married. And I guess I don't mind the ones in bed too much. It's the ones that end up in the bathroom on the tile floor, that you step on with bare feet. But pretty much got the dust handled, I think. So, Greg, why don't you start out? Uh-oh. Yeah, and if you've got any questions or thoughts or suggestions or you do it differently, just, holler at me. Okay, I guess we can do that. So I guess that's the ha 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 part. I think that's pretty important, because it's sort of like trying to control a 12-year-old. You just can't do it. Okay, so move down one. You should go to full screen on that. Unless. Okay. One of the things that, just isn't mentioned often enough with dust control systems is you got to be careful of fire. When you start moving the sawdust, through the plastic pipes, you can get static electricity and you can get quite a jolt off of that. Also, if you're doing metal, if you're grinding metal or sharpening tools on your grinder, you don't want to attach the dust collector right to the back of the grinder. You want to make sure that stuff hits the floor first so it cools off and doesn't start a fire inside the collector. And the other thing, the last time I noticed there was a couple of guys were turning epoxy. You can get a fire from that, with the chips. If it's not fully cured, okay, she's talking at me. It generates heat. And the shavings are a good insulator. They can be like steel wool. And if you put them in a pile, they get hot. And we used to run into problems like that all the time at Dynamatic, where I worked for many years. And when the union guys were pissed off about something, they would always pile the chips up, put the chips in a pile, and there'd be a fire and, work stoppage, So anyway, okay, go on, Greg. Okay, we're going to talk about my dust collection system and some other, basic background information. And that's the way I do it now. I did calculate, air plumbing systems and resistance and did a lot of testing. So I have a good idea, a good technical background. But, when you start making these systems at home, nobody gives you enough information. You can't get the curves that you need from any of the suppliers. So let me see what else I had on that slide. Yeah, and as I mentioned before, we lived in the house for almost 35 years, and I've got all my machinery is turned over, so I don't have any of the stuff I did 35 years ago, and it's been moved around. It's all on casters. So I've got a soft system. Nothing is hard piped, unlike there was somebody a couple of months ago that had a hard pipe system, but I never bothered to do that. Go ahead, Greg. Okay, the best way. Let's see. I should have think of bigger. Okay. Let me move this up. The best way, make less dust. No, I'm serious, you could, use, thin kerf saws. Uh, when you're turning, shear scrape the final one. If you're doing end grain bowls, you can use cabinet scrapers on them. Shut the lathe off and just run the scraper down. Okay, sure. And, since I do most of mine online, I certainly can understand that. And they always talk about, when you go to the demos, they talk about, one chisel minute is 10 minutes worth of sanding. So it behooves you to spend as much time, with a chisel, less with the sandpaper. And I've already been in, some of the hands-on, and they're always worthwhile to go to. And I can't get rid of the tear out. And a teacher will come over and look at my tool and look at the piece, and tear out's gone. I don't know how the hell he did it. And it's happened to me more than once. So, it's one of those things. So what's the next one? Oh, well, okay. And I was going to say, for flat work, if you're doing flat work, Catamount Rain will send the stuff for you to about 150 grit for $3.50 a minute. And that sounds like a lot of money. It really ain't. You'll use more than that in abrasive, and the stuff comes out flat, which really saves you time later on. Of course, the easiest way to get rid of the dust is just open a door or window. But, unfortunately, I'm in a basement. So I've got a blower, a kitchen exhaust fan that I've mounted in a window, and I can just blow the stuff out that way, and it works pretty well. The other thing you can do is you can just take a box fan and put a fiberglass furnace filter on the inside, on the inlet, and that works fairly well also. And it's cheap. Everybody's got those, and make sure it's a square one, and wire tie it on. You can duct tape it, but that always makes a mess. Okay, Greg. Okay, filters. Filters are actually, they're either simple or they're really complex. If you think about it, all the filter is it's you got a media with a hole in it, and you're going to let the dust plug the hole. And of course, that's not very efficient, because if you've only got one hole, one piece of dust does it. And so you're looking for a filter with lots of holes in it. And so things that you look at on the filters is the efficiency. The higher the efficiency, the better it's going to get the dirt out, the dust out. But the problem is the higher the efficiency, the more resistance to airflow there is. Particle size, you want a fine particle size, but again, that's a smaller hole, so there's more air resistance. Overall size of the filter, bigger the better, because you can have a whole lot more holes, and then the overall resistance is less. And the resistance at the airflow, if you got more resistance, it takes more power. And for most stationary systems, you need 1.5 horse to 2 horse. The HEPA filters, they always talk about a HEPA filter on high efficiency. And really what that is a HEPA filter, in theory, removes 99.7% of the particles greater than 0.3 microns. And to give you an idea of how much a micron is, I converted it for you up there. So that's a whole lot, smaller than your hair, for those of us that have hair. And when you're looking at the filters, you want a big one. And the corrugated paper seem to have more area, than the cloth bags that you typically get. Go ahead, Greg. Okay, this is the engineering slide. I guess I'm going to walk over here. Well, that's going to be a problem. Okay. The curves, when you get a cheap blower, this is a curve. This is the the airflow curve or a cheap flow or a low cost one. Make it like this. Yeah, we'll have to move it. See, if you've got all the data, you could make this curve for the system that you're designing. You know, if you buy a high quality large blower, this is a curve that you get, and this is resistance and airflow. So what this is saying is that with high resistance, you get more, or you get more airflow with higher resistance. The cheap system, you know, if you get it from Harbor Freight, you know, it's going to be down here. And then this is the resistance of the filter. And you add on the system resistance, you know, the ducting, you know, the pipes, the elbows, you know, and that sort of thing. And then the filter, when it gets dirty, you keep adding resistance to it. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Now, what happens is when you get a cheap filter or a cheap system, this curve, yeah, you get those wonderful trees, the curve flattens out, you know, the airflow, and it just drops right off. You know, that's when you stall the system. So if you put too many elbows in the system, you know, too many elbows would move this line over, here, you know, and so you can tolerate less dust in the filter. Okay. Any questions on this? And we did this for fans and radiators and water and everything else. Okay, Greg, why don't you? Okay. Okay. Yes. Doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference whether it's positive or negative. You know, and like I've got a Laguna system, and part of it is positive and part of it is negative. You know, when it goes, and we'll talk about cyclones, and the cyclone is negative and the paper filter is positive pressure. There's a blower is in between the two. And it really doesn't make any difference, although you'd like to keep the crap from flowing through the blower. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly right. And we'll talk about that on here. And that's why you need to keep the resistance low. And if you get too much resistance, the fan just says, I can't do it, and stops. Okay. So some general guidelines: buy the best that you can afford, probably skip Harbor Freight, keep runs large, same diameter as the inlet, and short, and minimize leaks, and, you know, do something with static electricity. Okay, so there's three general methods that I sort of came up with. You know, you control it at the source, you know, a dust collector or vacuum cleaner, a general air filter, you know, a circulation air filter in the room, or with, you know, personal protection, you know, some sort of breathing filter. Greg? Okay, when you're looking for a dust collector or vacuum, the things to look for is you want to get a cyclone pre-filter on it. And what the cyclone does is it gets the big stuff out so that it never gets to the filter.
they talk about sound. I like to have a quieter one, and 72 dBA you can talk over, but you don't want it much louder than that. You'd really like to have some sort of remote control on it. And you're always looking for a flow and static number, which they'll give you a flow number, but no static pressure, which is exactly what you were asking, what the static is. And usually you get the biggest horsepower that you can handle. I know that's a poor answer, but you can't get the data. Greg? Okay, now this is a diagram of a cyclone for, if you don't know how they work. It's basically a round system. It's kind of like a funnel, and the dust comes in on the side and it spins around. And as it drops down, it goes faster and faster till it gets to the bottom, and the air has to turn up to go out, but the dust can't turn fast enough, so it drops into the barrel. And I've got one of these on I have a fine vacuum cleaner, and this is a 5-gallon bucket, and that bucket, you empty that every several weeks. And the vacuum cleaner I haven't emptied in several years, so it really works. Okay, Greg. Okay, so for the stationary, let's just move on. Okay, this is the Laguna system that I bought upstairs. Actually, this is my second one. You can see the pre-filter on the left, and I opened up the door, and there's a HEPA filter on that. And that's a horse and a half, and unfortunately, I don't know why the hell they did it. It runs on 110, and you could run it on a dedicated 110 circuit. I don't know why they did that, because the motor itself is good for 110 or 220. Sure. Okay. 10 minutes. So, 7:32. We're gonna try to look it up some people online and see what. Sure. How you doing? Good. I'm redesigning my dust letter. Yeah. And I've got a 1.5 Ford 650 jet. And I use a garbage can for my side. Okay. Yeah. Now, I designed it in the first place where I've got my main line going from the garbage can. Yeah. One leg goes this way, one leg goes that. Okay. But I didn't put it on the ceiling. I put it up about this high. Okay. To try to cut down, because the higher you go,
remembering that it sucked. Or resistance.
You get it, okay, next slide.
What's the sound package? Is that reduces the noise?
Yeah, it reduces the noise. It doesn't get rid of it, unfortunately. And it's about 72 dBA afterwards, which is still, you can talk over it, but it's okay. And there's a Y. Now, one of the things too on a Y, you got to make sure that you're going through the Y the correct direction. The base of the Y has got to be pointed in the direction of the airflow. If you've got it reversed, you get an incredible amount of resistance, and there isn't any dust collector that'll work if it's the wrong direction. Okay, next. Okay, connection to dust source. There were several questions about this. Forward, so okay, well, ideally you'd like metal ducting, like dryer vent, but sheet metal, because there's no static problems, and you want to keep the run short. And if you got to have bends in it, make the bends as gradual as you can. 190-degree bend is worth 50 feet of straight pipe. There's enough resistance in 190-degree bend is 50 feet of straight pipe. So, you see guys that, come out of the dust collector, go up the ceiling and run over and down, and then awful lot of resistance there. Get rid of all of that stuff. Corrugated hose is pretty bad. Also, it got a lot of resistance. That's okay. So we'll get there. So use as little of that as you possibly can. And a static dissipation wire. Black fittings and black hose usually have carbon in them. That's what makes them black. That dissipates the static. White doesn't have carbon, and so it builds up. So you've got to have the copper wire across a jumper. Otherwise, you're going to have static buildup. Okay, go on, Greg. Okay, a downdraft sanding table. That's what I've got. It's homemade. I made it a long time ago, and it works very well. I made it short enough so that it's under another work surface. So, Greg, another one. So it pulls out, it's on casters and it pulls out. And so that's the top of the downdraft table. It's just a chunk of plywood that I drilled holes in. Next, there's a pre-filter on there. It's just some fiberglass freeform filter material that you can get anywhere. Next, furnace filters. Next, and then there's a furnace blower. And if I were going to do it today, I would make sure that I had a little bit more air passage on the side of it. But it works pretty well. And it's reasonably quiet, and you can just let it run all the time, and it functions as a general air filter, a room air filter. So next, and there's the outlet. And I suppose I should put a duct on there, or a grate, but I haven't caught my fingers in it yet. Okay. This is another dust collector. I use it for carving, and when a wood burn. And I forgot to talk about that stuff, but that's a way to eliminate sanding or to minimize sanding. And some of the pieces were burned, and some of them were carved and whatnot. But if you're going to wood burn in the basement, you need a filter. And you don't see it, but there's a carbon filter behind the paper filter on that. And when it gets dirty, you just take it outside and bang it out and put it back in, and away you go. That's the back of it. And there's just a couple of pancake fans in there. It's nothing exotic. Greg? Okay, there's my fine vacuum cleaner. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but it's FEIN. It's a brand name of a vacuum cleaner, and it's quiet. it's again about 72. And you can see the dust deputy cyclone, on the right side. And so the air goes into that. So that part of it is in suction. There's a vacuum there. And then when it gets into the vacuum cleaner, that then that part's in pressure. Okay, Greg. Okay, and the desirable features, if you're looking for something like that, is get a dust deputy. And the Fine has a manual on-off switch or a manual automatic switch on it, so you can plug a sander into it. And when the sander goes on, the vacuum cleaner turns on. And you can do that with, brush tools, handheld. But if you put an induction motor on it, you'll burn that switch out right away. Okay. And you get one whack at it. Here's a room air filter, and we talked about that with Debbie, and they sell them upstairs. And that's the pre-filter on it. And when you take the pre-filter off, there's a set of cloth filters inside, and that's the HEPA filter. And so periodically you just, bang out the outside filter, and, then you shake this thing out. And they do a real good job. And I happen to have 3 of them, it's a long story, but that's okay. Greg? The other thing you can do too is you can't always get rid of the dust in your shop. And so you can get a finishing tent, and they sell them upstairs. It keeps the dust off of the stuff, and it does a very good job. Or you can go to IKEA, and go to the kids section. They've got an incredible variety of tents and that look like tree houses or the inside of a snake or a worm or something like that, that kids love. And I wish we had those when I was a kid. But anyway, they just put this stuff in there. Okay, so then, that filter that everybody remembers. And okay, the next one. And this is probably the best way for personal protection. It's a trend air filter, and it's powered. There's batteries in it, and it'll run for 5 or 6 hours on a charge. And when you look up on the top, the white things on the side are the filters, and they claim it's HEPA filters. And I know I can sand walnut all day and blow my nose at the end of the day, and it comes out clear. It's also got a face shield on there. And well, what was it? Last month, somebody came in with stitches. This would have prevented that. And these helmets and face shields, they're not really there to stop the piece. They're there to deflect it, so that when it hits you, it bounces off rather than, continuing and doing the damage. Okay, so anybody got any questions or ideas or thoughts on this so far? Yeah.
We did the corrugated tubing.
Yeah.
Is there another flexible tubing?
I'm not aware of any. I'm sure there is someplace, but that's just one of those things. Yeah. And that's the one you want to get. Yeah, and in reducing the resistance, the filter will last longer, or you can go longer before you have to clean it out. Which is good and bad, I guess. It's sort of like cleaning the lint filter on the dryer. Yeah. It, yeah. I use something like a garbage can for quite a while. And what you could do to make that more efficient, to make it work better, is to put some, elbows in there to make it swirl on the outside of the can. Yeah. The other thing you have to be careful of is if you use a good vacuum cleaner on a garbage can, you can collapse the garbage can. And that gets, yeah, that's interesting to do that. You probably won't want to do it a second time. And of course, you want to minimize all the leaks, and everything. So any other, okay, power sanding. So there's not very many slides here at all. And I did bring some tools over, and I've had a real interesting one here. Uh, the power sanding is a whole lot faster, than hand sanding. And I think you get a better finish because you're willing to go with finer paper. And when you're doing the power sanding, there's basically three kinds of, rotary sanding. The people start out, just using a drill, and putting it on there. So that's the rotary. And, that's sort of like this, or with a 4.5-inch angle grinder. But you get swirl marks with it, and especially on the inside of a bowl, and you can't get them out. Or they're very difficult to get out. And the finest one is, a dual action sander. There's two kinds of dual action. This one, the disc is free and it just rotates. Okay, and you get a very fine finish with this. I'll show you. I'm going to set this down. Bosch makes a real interesting sander. This one, is the forced rotation. And if you take it apart, there's a disc inside that you can flip over. And then it just spins. I had it the other way. Then it just spins free. And so when you have the locked rotation, it sands quicker. And that's what I always use. And the other way, when it's free, it doesn't sand quite as quickly. Or you can get a smoother finish. Okay, you want to go to the next slide, Greg? Say that again. Somebody.
How does it stand at all?
It does. I mean, the DA has been around for forever. That's what all the auto body shops use. And it's more like an orbital sander. It goes around, and depending on how you tilt it, it rotates or it doesn't rotate, but it's always orbiting. And you get a very fine finish with it. Say that again. No, this is an air sander. There's Sorby makes one, that the work powers it. But it's a Grex, it's an air, and it works very well. People always have questions about questions about sandpaper grit. There's two grading systems that are in common use. CAMI, which is the one that's US, and P is right there. The P is a European system, and they're pretty close below about 240 grit. And after that, when you look at it, you can see that they start diverging. So I'm going to go over, we can't see. They start diverging, and I guess the more of the story on that is probably stick with the same grit from the same brand. All these colors have been. This I think is the where these colors washed out. This is the U.S. curve, and this is the the European curve. And so this is finer is this way. So if here's a US fine and here's a European fine, the same with the same numeric number. And so the US is a lot finer. And it doesn't really make any difference because you can get finer grits with the European. So you end up in the same place, but if you start switching grit, systems down in here, you can be going backwards rather than forwards. And that curve, that table you get on things for. Okay, next. Okay, so sanding techniques. I usually run my lathe somewhere between 300 and 500 RPM. If it's uncomfortable, slow it down a little bit. If it gets too hot, slow it down. You can usually start out running it faster, and as you get to a finer grit, slow it down. I hope that it's smooth enough with my chisel that I can start about 180. Doesn't always happen. And especially, with spalted, or if you've got a lot of tear out, and walnut is notorious for tearing out. So try shear scraping it, sharpen your tool right away. What do I have there? Light cuts, put wax on the surface. Or if you're using oil or something like that, or shellac, you can actually put a coat of finish on it, because that will sort of stiffen up the fibers, and you can trim them off. And even with the wax usually doesn't, bother, petroleum or oil-based finishes. Water-based, yeah, but not the other ones. It's a good idea also, when I sand stuff, I'll do a grit, and I'll go forward, and then I'll reverse it. And using the same grit, I'll do it in the reverse direction. And then I'll go back into the forward direction and hand sand it just a bit, because you're changing swirl marks, to rotational marks. And you don't want a scratch pattern that people can recognize and see. Okay, does that make sense? And it doesn't take any longer to do it. It's just good practice. Depending on what your lathe is, you may have problems with your chuck backing off. And there's usually either there's a set screw on there, or the other way to do it is just make sure that your tailstock is up, and sort of pressing on the bowl, and that way it won't back off either. It's not so much of a problem if you've got a variable speed, VFD on the lathe, but if it's, the older one that's on off, they'll spin off. So, okay, next. Yeah, that way, the other right. Okay, and how fine do you sand? Boy, arguing about that all day. Read the finish instructions. And if you're using milk paint or varnish, lots of times they tell you only to go to 220. And poly is so thick, it just fills up everything. For oil, you got to be much more careful. So no visible scratches, which means sanding to at least 400. But usually once you get to about 220 or 240, the grits after that go really quick, because you're just sort of smoothing it. You're not really, knocking down any high points or taking valleys off. It's all like this. For oil, I go to 600 or 800 grit, and that way I can make sure that I didn't miss anything. I had a bad experience one year. Well, you're talking about Turn On Chicago, which I've gone to many years, and especially when it was at the monastery, that was always great. And Alan Lacer was doing the critique at the Instant Gallery. He was looking at bowls. He was looking at two bowls there, and oh yeah, one of those is mine. Yeah, come on, Alan, pick it up. I want to hear what you're going to say. And he picked it up and looked at it and said, "It's a perfect example of a 15-minute bowl." Yeah. you know, and of course, oh, I didn't say anything. And he said, had the guy spent another 15 minutes, the good ball, it was an okay ball. It would have gone okay to, to good or very good. He said, yeah, there's some drips in the varnish and there's some, scratches. And of course, I had looked at it very carefully ahead of time, and no, there weren't any. And after he left, I went and sort of looked at it and picked it up, and oh shit, bastard, but he was right. So, and of course, somebody else once said, they were talking about bowls and sizes and whatnot, and it was probably Jacques Visray. He said, "Don't let the sawyer decide what your design is. Nobody knows how big a bowl you could have got out of that chunk of wood. They'll know if the bowl is good. They won't know how good it is, but if its bowl is bad, they'll know that it's bad. So who cares what size it is? Make it good." And the other thing too, to get a really good finish with oil, is when you put it on there, use sandpaper to rub it in. Slow the lathe down, 2 or 300 RPM, and put the oil on the piece, and then hold 400 grit sandpaper on it, and move it back and forth, and you'll create a slurry that fills the pores in the wood, and it'll dry very quickly, and usually within 2 minutes or so, it's gone from being wet to tacky, and at that point you just stop. Well, you really need to talk to Harold Solberg about that. And what he does is he follows the instructions very carefully. And for the first coat, he floods the surface and lets it sit for the 10 minutes, just like it says on the can. And then he wipes all it off, wipes everything off. We've actually had, several times there's been people that use the same finish, and Harold's has got this, this beautiful deep sheen to it. And the other guys was just sort of dull. They use the same finish, and it was just a difference in the technique, but you flood the surface and then let it sit and wipe it off.
What's your take on the claw wheel with the polishing con?
Those work very well also, and the Beal system, and that works well. And I usually end up buffing my bowls, with that. Although you can start off, if they're reasonably smooth, you can, buff them just the raw wood, and you can get a pretty good finish. And if you're using one of the tropical woods like the Coco Bolo, you don't even really need to finish that. You can just buff it, or you can actually even just hold a wool pad on it, and you'll get that sheen. I don't know, those some people, can get allergic to the dust from that. Yeah, there's you get a very fine dust off of that. And I was making a grandfather clock out of Paducah, which is a wonderful, red wood, and and I had this little rash here, and then I got it on my wrist where my shop coat ended, and one day I needed to take a lavatory break, and I didn't wash my hands, and oh, honey, it's contact dermatitis. Honest. Oh well. Anyway, let's see. Why don't you go to the next one? That might be it. Okay, and the media. Okay, now there was lots of talk about media last time, or some talk about it. Get a good brand. You spent a lot of money on the lathe, you spent a lot of money on the chisels, so get a name brand. And I don't know that it makes a lot of difference whether you use a braid net, or the solid stuff. And I use a combination of both. Those are good names up there, and Klingspor has got a pretty good selection of stuff, and you get a club discount. And sort of stick to the same brand makes some sense. We had a sanding guy in here. That's on the next slide, but you could see that if you switch back and forth from grading systems, you could have problems, at when you're getting very in the fine end. The edge shape. There's smooth edges, and rippled edges. Now we had, who was it, Vince, the sanding guy, here 5 years ago? And he was talking about that. Somebody asked him about that explicitly. He said, "Oh, the ripples. Yeah, I talked to the guy, the designer." He said, "Yeah, I just wanted to make our product different. So the ripples don't do anything. They're just there. It's like different color bass lures. Uh, but get good stuff. One of the things too that seems to work pretty well is the flap sanders, and especially on the inside of a bowl. They tend not to leave the ridges, although the gouges. And the backing pads on the inside of the bowl use a really soft one. On the outside, you can use a little bit of a harder one. So works well. Okay, next one. Okay, that's about it. Any questions or ideas or yes?
What do you use for a fluid tank?
Okay, what I have is one of the I have a jet collector that I just put down. I just mounted it right in front of the lathe right here. And I always wear the trend mask. Always. When I sand. So that's what I do, and that seems to work okay. And of course, you'll find that when you're sanding your bowl, that's just gonna take forever. And then some, and you're gonna have this soft wood, so you're gonna have tear out on the end grain. So wax the hell out of it, and that'll help to keep the dust down, but also to reduce the tear out. When I first started, I had some beautiful maple burls, and I didn't know anything, but hell, a lathe, they can't be too difficult, So I had a dull scraper. I didn't know that you were supposed to sharpen them. I mean, it looked sharp, and I used a scraper and I turned it, and I worked very hard to get the edges straight and straight lines. Which anyway, I'm kind of embarrassed when I see them now, and I coveted 16 grit sandpaper. Had to start at someplace. That's the way to get the tear out. And of course, 16 grit, it's got one rock every square inch. So I've been doing, I started out doing pretty horrible things, and I don't do anything quite that bad anymore, but so anyway. Anything else? Yes.
With my dust collector, I got a straight piece of pipe now, kind of backing.
Yeah.
And it always collects dust on the outside, static electricity. How do I deal with that?
Well, you're going to get the static electricity, but you've got to run a ground wire.
Just screw it to the outside.
Just screw it to the outside and wrap it around and put it on the outside. And if you put the inside, chips will collect on it and you'll clog the hose. So just wrap it on the outside. And then when you get to your power supply, if there's metal on it, connect it to the metal, because the vacuum cleaners are all grounded. So that's how you do that. Yeah, because it gets interesting in the winter. And of course, if you think about it, it only happens in the winter, not in the summer. And there's hardly any difference in the amount of water in the air. So it really doesn't take very much to dissipate the static, but you got to do it. A couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, they had a big fire out of a plant in Burlington, with static electricity at a mill. So, flour mill. So anything else?
Either bears something from
Well, the helmet has earmuffs on it. I don't use a microwave to dry bowls, so that's Yeah. Yeah, once. Honey, why don't you go to a spa this weekend? Yeah. Yeah. So anything else? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Sure.
So let's do the wood raffle. Dave. If anybody wants your slides, are you willing to? Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, Dennis has a set of slides, so